Jack Miller lived where maps stopped being detailed. Beyond his small metal outpost, the land turned red and empty, stretching so far that even the sky felt tired looking at it. The nearest human settlement was 3 days away by rover. The stars were bright here, cruelly bright, like they were watching him and saying nothing. Jack worked as a maintenance handler for the Frontier relay towers. He fixed broken machines. He talked to no one. Days passed quietly. Nights were worse. At night, the wind screamed across the plains, shaking the walls of his outpost. Jack would sit alone at a narrow metal table, eating reheated food, listening to an empty room. He talked to himself sometimes, just to hear a voice. Other times, he said nothing at all. He was not weak, he was not angry. He was just tired of being alone. Humans were not meant to live like this forever. One night after a long shift repairing a damaged relay, Jack returned home to darkness. The power flickered. His dinner packet burned. He laughed once softly, then stopped. The sound felt wrong. That was the night he opened the Colony network and saw the advertisement. INTRSB CIES Companion and Marriage Program. Legal, safe, verified. For frontier citizens seeking family and stability. Jack stared at the screen for a long time. He had seen the program before. Everyone had. Most people joked about it. Some called it desperate. Others called it brave. Jack had never clicked it until now. He rubbed his face with rough hands. His hair was messy. His eyes looked older than his age. 36 years old, and he could not remember the last time someone had touched his hand. "This is stupid," he muttered. But he clicked anyway. The system asked questions, hundreds of them. Did he want children? Did he fear alien cultures? Was he patient? Was he kind under pressure? Did he understand that love could grow slowly? Jack answered honestly. He said he was lonely. He said he was scared of dying alone. He said he did not need perfection, only someone who would stay. When the screen finally went dark, Jack felt exposed, like he had just told his deepest secrets to the universe. A moment later, a message appeared. Match in progress. Jack's heart beat faster. He almost canceled it. His finger hovered over the exit command. He imagined an empty future again. Silent meals, silent years. He let his hand drop. 3 days later, another message arrived. Match found. Compatibility score, high. Arrival scheduled in 30 days. Jack leaned back in his chair, breathing slowly. His chest felt tight. He was afraid to feel hope, but it came anyway, warm and dangerous. He imagined a human woman stepping off a shuttle. Someone tired like him. Someone who would understand frontier life. Someone small enough to fit beside him in the narrow bed. He cleaned his outpost the next day, then cleaned it again. He repaired things that were not broken. He stood outside at night, looking at the stars, wondering who was out there thinking about him. What the system did not show him was the full profile. It did not show him her species size classification. It did not show him her strength rating. It did not show him the reason her people had let her go. 30 days passed slowly. On the morning of the shuttle's arrival, Jack stood alone on the landing pad. His hands shook, his stomach hurt. He felt foolish for caring this much. The sky darkened as the transport ship descended. Jack smiled nervously and whispered to himself, "Just don't be alone anymore." The ramp began to lower. And Jack Miller had no idea that the life stepping toward him was nothing like he had imagined. The shuttle landed with a sharp hiss, metal plates groaning under the weight of the craft. Red dust swirled around it, painting the landing pad in streaks of orange and brown. Jack Miller stood at the edge, his boots digging into the dirt. He had washed his face, combed his hair, and even brushed the dust off his coat, but nothing could make him feel ready for what was coming. The ramp began to lower slowly, each movement creaking as if the ship itself was nervous. Jack's heart thumped in his chest. He kept telling himself it's just a person, just another human, nothing to fear, but deep down he felt a knot of dread twisting tighter. Then she appeared. The figure that stepped onto the pad was not human. Not like him, not like any human he had ever seen in colonies or holologs. She was tall, twice his height, and broad, her shoulders stretching the edges of the shuttle ramp. Her skin was a soft blue-gray, faintly glowing in the early morning light. Her eyes were dark and deep, reflecting the endless sky, and her long arms moved with a grace that was almost liquid. Jack's jaw dropped. He wanted to speak, to ask questions, to run, but nothing came out. He simply stared. "My name is Cora," her voice said. It was melodic, soft, and her translator worked perfectly. "Are you Jack Miller?" Jack swallowed hard and nodded. He wanted to say something clever, welcoming, normal, but his throat felt too tight. "Why, yes," he finally managed. His words sounded small, even to him. Cora smiled faintly. She placed her travel case on the ground. The case was large, metallic, and looked light in her hands, as if it weighed nothing at all. The sight of her strength, her size, and her calm movements made Jack feel even smaller than he already was. "You ordered me?" Jack asked, finally finding his voice. Cora tilted her head, her eyes studying him. "Yes," she said simply, "but I am more than your order." Jack blinked, unsure what to say. His mind raced with thoughts he could not articulate. Did I make a mistake? Did I understand the program correctly? Did I really want this? The wind kicked up, tossing red dust around their boots. Cora's hair, long and dark, flowed behind her like a shadow in motion. She seemed otherworldly, impossible, yet there she was, real, standing before him, waiting. I don't know what to say," Jack admitted. His voice was quieter than he wanted. The outpost windows rattled as some colonists peeked out, whispering and pointing. Some laughed nervously, some shook their heads. Cora noticed the whispers. She took a careful step closer, not to intimidate but to bridge the distance. Her height made her looming, almost too powerful for Jack to fully comprehend. Yet she moved slowly, as if aware that every step might scare him. Jack tried to smile. It felt awkward, forced, inadequate. "I didn't expect you to be like this." Cora tilted her head again and studied him. There was no mockery in her expression, only understanding. "Your profile said you were looking for companionship. You did not mention size preference." Jack laughed nervously, a dry sound that dissolved in the wind. "Yeah, guess I didn't think about that." A silence fell. The shuttle hissed in the background. The wind moaned across the pad. Jack suddenly felt how small and fragile he was in the vastness of this planet, in the presence of someone so enormous and alien. Yet despite his fear, despite the doubt, there was a spark, a strange, unexplainable feeling of relief. She was here. She existed. Someone chose to come to this lonely outpost, someone who could be with him. Cora lowered her eyes to his, carefully matching his gaze as if telling him he was safe, that he could trust her. "Shall we go inside?" she asked softly. Jack nodded. His hands trembled, but for the first time in years, the thought of another living being near him did not fill him with fear. Instead, it made his chest ache in a way that felt strangely warm. Together, they walked toward the outpost. Cora moved with precision, her massive form carefully navigating the narrow doorway. Jack followed, small and uncertain, but somehow buoyed by her presence. He realized something as he watched her enter. Nothing about this day would be ordinary. His life, the lonely existence he had grown used to, was about to change in ways he could not yet imagine. And though he did not know it yet, the arrival of Cora, the alien woman twice his size, was only the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. The first night together in the outpost was quiet but not peaceful. Jack sat on his narrow bunk, staring at the wall, while Cora remained near the entrance, her massive form resting against the frame of the doorway. Even though she did not speak, her presence filled the room, making Jack feel both protected and exposed. He thought about the whispers from the colony. He could almost hear the judgment in their words. "She could crush you by mistake. He's going to regret this. That's not a match, that's a mistake." Each thought made him smaller, even as her shadow loomed larger. Fear settled into his chest like a weight, making every breath heavy. Jack wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. He had been so lonely that the idea of companionship had seemed perfect. But now, seeing her in the cold light of the outpost, he realized how different she was from anything he had expected. Twice his height, twice his strength. Her eyes, calm and steady, reminded him of a quiet storm, beautiful yet overwhelming. He turned his gaze away, focusing on the small metal table in the corner. The dishes he had cleaned sat neatly stacked, untouched for the night. He wanted to speak to her to bridge the growing distance, but fear held him back. Cora, however, was not sleeping. She crouched slightly, adjusting her limbs to fit in the narrow hallway outside. Her species did not require constant conversation, but she had learned that patience could be a bridge between worlds. She understood fear in others because she had known it herself. Her people had sent her away because she was gentle, too gentle for the warrior life she was bred into. Now, far from home, she carried that gentleness carefully, like fragile glass. Jack finally whispered, almost to himself, I don't know if I can do this. Cora turned slightly, her voice calm and soothing. Do what, Jack? He shook his head. Be married, be together. I thought I wanted company, but now I don't know if I can live with someone this big. Cora paused, considering. She did not respond with anger or offense. Instead, she said quietly, I am not here to harm you. I am here because I chose to come. That is different from being ordered or commanded. Her words struck him. He had spent years living by schedules, systems, and automated instructions. Nothing had ever been chosen for him, not truly. He realized that she had crossed an unimaginable distance, not just through space, but through the fear and rules of her own people, to be here. Jack looked at her again. She was enormous, yes, but she moved with care, her eyes full of understanding. And in that moment he saw something that made the tight knot in his chest loosen just a little. Courage. Real courage. Courage that was not loud or violent, but quiet and steady, the kind that could hold a place against the universe. Still, doubt lingered. What if they could not understand each other? What if her size, her different body, her different culture made it impossible to live together? He pictured himself crushed, not by her intentionally, but by accident, by a gesture too strong, by a simple mistake. The thought made him want to run back to the safety of solitude. Cora moved closer, lowering her massive head so that her eyes were level with his. I understand your fear, she said softly. I have it too. I have never lived among humans this way. I do not know if I will succeed, but fear is not the same as failure. It only warns us that we are about to do something important. Jack's lips trembled. He had spent so long avoiding important things, important feelings, important risks. And now here was someone not human, not anything he had expected, asking him to take a risk with her. I've never had anyone stay, Jack admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. People come and go, machines break, dust storms destroy everything. I always end up alone. Cora reached out her hand, massive yet gentle. Her fingertips hovered above his shoulder, careful not to touch too hard. Then let us try, she said simply. Let us stay together, you and I, we can learn. Jack looked at her hand, at the careful way she held back her strength. And for the first time, he believed it. Maybe, just maybe, this was someone he could trust, someone who would not leave. He swallowed his fear and nodded slowly. Okay, we'll try. Cora smiled faintly, a small curve that seemed enormous on her face. The fear did not disappear, but it softened, replaced with a fragile hope that stretched between them like a thread of light in the vast darkness of the frontier. Outside, the wind howled against the walls, but inside, Jack felt something he had not felt in years, that he might not be alone after all. That night, the stars above seemed less cruel, and for the first time, he could imagine a future with someone beside him. The storm came without warning. One moment, the sky was a pale orange. The next, it had turned a violent gray, with winds screaming like a living thing across the red plains. Jack was inside the outpost, checking the power regulators when the first gust hit. The walls groaned under the force, shaking the entire building. Dust swept through the air like tiny knives, stinging his skin and making his eyes water. Jack ran to the doorway, trying to secure the shutters. Each gust slammed into him, threatening to knock him off his feet. He gritted his teeth and pushed forward, but the wind was too strong. A metal sheet from the roof tore loose and hurtled past him. He stumbled backward, arms flailing, his heart racing in terror. Then he felt its strong hands, steady and unyielding, gripping him. Before he could react, he was lifted off his feet and carried toward safety. He looked up, squinting through the dust, and saw Cora standing tall, her massive frame bracing against the storm. Her arms were like iron, yet her movements were careful, precise, shielding him from every flying shard and gust. "I've got you," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos. Her translator carried over the roaring wind like a promise. "Hold on." Jack felt helpless but safe in her grip. She placed him inside the small storage room and then went back out into the storm, moving with impossible strength and grace. He watched through the narrow window as she held up collapsing walls, lifted heavy panels, and tied cables that whipped violently in the wind. It was exhausting to watch, and he could not believe that one being could be so powerful yet so careful. Hours passed, the storm tore at the outpost with relentless force. Jack wanted to go help her, but she shook her head when he tried. "Stay here," she commanded softly. "You are small, you must survive." The wind roared like a beast outside, but inside, Jack felt a strange, warm sense of awe. Fear mixed with admiration and even guilt for doubting her arrival. He realized how wrong he had been to question her. This alien woman, twice his size, stranger, completely foreign, was protecting him with every ounce of her strength. By midnight, the storm began to subside, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Jack opened the storage door, expecting damage, collapse, maybe even tragedy. But the outpost was mostly intact. Walls were bent in places, the generator panels slightly scorched, but the building had survived. And standing near the main doorway was Cora, her chest rising and falling as she caught her breath, her hands still gripping parts of the fallen roof she had held in place. Jack stepped forward, voice shaking. You saved it. You saved me." Cora looked down at him, her enormous eyes calm but tired. "We survived together," she said simply. "I am here, you are here, that is enough." Jack felt tears sting his eyes. He had spent so long believing that survival was about machines, about planning, about enduring alone. But she had shown him something different. Survival was about trust, about courage, about caring enough for someone else to risk everything for them. He stepped closer, small but determined. I judged you wrong," he admitted, voice breaking. "I thought you were too big, too different, too much, but I see now you're exactly what I needed." Cora inclined her massive head. "And I see you. You are not weak, you are steady. You are brave, even when you do not realize it." The outpost smelled of dust and smoke, but Jack felt something inside him shift. The fear of the storm, the loneliness he had carried for years, melted in that moment. He saw her not as an alien, not as someone impossible to live with, but as a companion. Someone who had chosen to be here in this desolate place with him. They stayed by the doorway for hours, watching the fatting storm clouds. Jack finally laughed, a soft, genuine sound because the storm had shown him something he had not expected. Strength could come in many forms. Protection could come from the most unlikely of places. And kindness, real kindness, could be more powerful than any machine, any law, any weapon. That night, Jack realized the frontier was no longer just a place of isolation and fear. It was a place of possibility. And he understood that in a galaxy that could be cruel and indifferent, a human and an alien, no matter the size difference, could build something that mattered. Cora lowered her huge frame onto the floor nearby, careful not to crush anything. Jack sat beside her, feeling safe for the first time in his life. The stars outside shone softly through the cracked windows, and he knew, somehow, that they would survive this frontier together, whatever storms came next. The morning after the storm, the outpost smelled of wet metal and scorched dust. Jack moved slowly, his muscles stiff from the long night. Cora had already begun inspecting the building, checking walls and doors, adjusting equipment with careful precision. She looked enormous, but every movement was gentle, deliberate, as if she feared harming anything fragile, including him. Jack watched her work and felt a strange mixture of awe and shame. He had doubted her arrival, worried about her size, feared that her strength would make life impossible. But now, after the storm, he saw clearly how wrong he had been. Strength without care could destroy, but her strength carried purpose, protection, and understanding. "I don't know how to thank you," Jack said quietly, stepping closer. His voice sounded small in the vast room, but she turned to him, meeting his gaze with those deep, steady eyes. "Thanking me is not necessary," Cora said softly. "I am here, that is what matters." Jack's chest tightened. He realized he had spent years expecting others to leave, to abandon him in the dust, and the thought of someone staying, the thought of her staying, was terrifying and wonderful at the same time. "But I judged you," he admitted. I thought you were too much, too big, too different. I was scared." Cora inclined her head, her lips curving in a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Fear is natural. It shows that you care about what is important. You are brave enough to admit it." Jack felt tears prick at the edges of his eyes. No one had ever called him brave. No one had ever recognized the small risks he had taken just to survive in this lonely outpost. And here she was, a being from another world, acknowledging his courage with her enormous, gentle presence. He stepped closer slowly until the space between them felt smaller. I don't want to be alone anymore," he said. "Not really, not like before." Cora's massive hand hovered near his shoulder, careful not to overwhelm him. "Then we will choose each other," she said. "Not because a system told us to, not because it is required, but because we want to." Jack's heart hammered in his chest. For years, he had lived by schedules, contracts, and instructions. No one had ever asked him to choose, and no one had ever offered him a choice with so much care and trust behind it. The weight of her words sank in. Choosing someone meant risk, commitment, hope, and vulnerability, all things he had avoided for far too long. "I want that," he whispered, his voice raw. "I choose you." Cora's smile widened and she lowered herself slightly, bringing her massive eyes level with his. "And I choose you," she replied. Her voice carried calm authority but also warmth, a certainty that steadied the trembling in his chest. They spent the rest of the morning together, repairing what the storm had broken and talking in quiet voices. They shared stories. Jack spoke of the lonely nights in the outpost, the endless wind and dust, the long stretches of silence. Cora shared memories of her home world, of a society that valued strength above all, and how her gentle nature had made her an outcast there. In those hours, they discovered more than compatibility. They discovered understanding, respect, a fragile, growing bond built on trust and acceptance. By afternoon, Jack realized that the walls he had built around himself over decades were beginning to crumble. He felt lighter, freer, and for the first time in years, capable of hope. The thought that he had once doubted her now felt almost ridiculous. She had proven herself not just strong, but wise, gentle, and capable of choices that mattered. He laughed quietly as she handed him a heavy panel, smiling despite the dust and heat. "I used to be afraid of storms," he admitted, "and now I see them differently." "Storms are not always threats," Cora said softly. "Sometimes they show us who we truly are and what we are willing to protect." Jack nodded, feeling the truth of her words. In the wake of the storm, he had discovered more than survival. He had discovered courage, strength, and the willingness to open his heart despite fear and past loneliness. That night, as the twin moons rose above the red plains, Jack and Cora stood side by side outside the outpost. The stars shimmered like distant fires, and the wind whispered across the barren land. He reached out, his hand brushing hers, small against her massive fingers but steady. "Together," he asked. "Together," she confirmed, her voice soft but unwavering. In that moment, on a lonely world at the edge of human space, two beings from completely different worlds made a choice that would define their lives. Not a choice forced by law or contract, but a choice born from trust, courage, and a desire to share the weight of a universe that could so easily be cruel and indifferent. Jack finally understood. Survival had never been enough. To truly live, one had to choose connection. And in choosing Cora, he had chosen not just a companion, but a future filled with hope, protection, and unexpected joy. Weeks passed, and the outpost began to feel less like a lonely station at the edge of the galaxy and more like a home. Jack and Cora had settled into routines together. He cooked small meals while she carried supplies from the distant storage sheds, careful not to crush anything or anyone in her path. They learned each other's habits, the small gestures that meant comfort, the glances that meant care. But life on the frontier was never quiet for long. One evening, as the twin suns dipped low behind the red hills, a distant rumble reached Jack's ears. He froze, scanning the horizon. The rumble grew into the sound of engines and heavy machinery moving over dust. Raiders. Jack's stomach sank. He had faced trouble before: small-time thieves, equipment thefts, but never organized raiders. They were here for supplies, and the outpost, with its small population, was an easy target. Fear, sharp and urgent, clawed at him. He turned to Cora. We can't fight them, not alone." Cora's massive frame moved to stand beside him. She did not flinch, did not hesitate. Her eyes were calm, steady, like the surface of a lake before a storm. "Then we will protect this place," she said simply. "Together." Jack swallowed his fear. He realized she was right. Alone, he might have been crushed, outnumbered, hopeless. But with her courage and strength, there was a chance. The raiders arrived soon after, vehicles rolling through the dust like a tide of metal. They expected fear, expected to meet trembling humans who would surrender easily. They did not expect a man standing tall and a massive alien woman blocking the main entrance. Cora's height and strength were intimidating. She moved with precision, holding gates in place, blocking access points. Jack followed her lead, helping where he could, securing doors, diverting small debris, using his knowledge of the outpost to slow the intruders. He was small, yes, but he was clever, and Cora's protection allowed him to act with confidence. The raiders tried to push through. Machines bumped against Cora's broad shoulders, and she did not budge. Her grip held doors closed, her long arms lifted heavy panels with ease, and when necessary, she used her size to press forward, forcing intruders back without harming them. Jack realized something extraordinary. He had always thought of survival as endurance, as being strong enough to endure storms and dust and loneliness. But this was different. Survival was about courage, about standing up for something and someone, about using strength wisely. And in that moment he felt human strength in a new way. Small, yes, but determined. Brave, yes, even against fear. Hours passed. The raiders, frustrated and intimidated, finally retreated. They muttered to themselves about the unnatural strength of the outpost's defense, about the small human who refused to yield, and the enormous alien who moved like a mountain. When silence returned, Jack and Cora stood together, dust covering them, sweat on his forehead and along her glowing skin. He looked at her, feeling a mixture of awe, gratitude, and something deeper, love in its fragile, quiet form. You did it," he said, voice trembling. "We did it together." Cora lowered herself slightly, massive eyes meeting his. "We are stronger when we are united," she said. "Strength alone is not enough. Courage alone is not enough. But together, we are more than any danger that comes." Jack nodded, understanding fully for the first time what humanity could be. Not clever machines, not weapons, not strict rules. Humanity was choice. Compassion, cooperation, bravery in the face of impossible odds. And here, on a lonely world at the edge of the galaxy, a human and an alien had proven it. He felt a surge of pride, not just for surviving, but for choosing to stand, for choosing trust, for choosing connection. Cora reached out, brushing a hand against his shoulder in a gesture of care, careful not to overwhelm him with her strength. He felt the warmth, the deliberate gentleness, and understood that this partnership was something rare, something extraordinary. That night the outpost was quiet again. Jack and Cora sat outside, watching the stars emerge, tiny points of light against the endless darkness of space. They were bruised, tired, and exhausted, but alive. And they had done more than survive. They had proven that even the smallest human with heart and courage could stand beside the largest, most alien strength and create something unbreakable. Jack smiled faintly. For the first time, he felt ready to face whatever the galaxy threw at them. Not alone, not small, together. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that this test, the storm of raiders, had not been just a challenge. It had been a gift. A reminder that humanity, in its simplest form, could shine brightest when it chose connection over fear, and that he and Cora were exactly that. Years passed, and the outpost that had once felt so small and lonely became a home. Jack and Cora worked side by side, building, repairing, and expanding. Children played in the red dust, laughing under the shade of Cora's massive frame. The colony had grown around them, but the heart of it remained the same. A human and an alien who had chosen each other against all odds. Jack had grown older. His hair had streaks of gray, and the lines on his face told stories of long days and nights on the frontier. Yet he carried himself differently now, more confident, more certain. Cora, still towering and strong, had softened the edges of her alien presence. She laughed freely, her deep voice carrying across the outpost, and she moved with a gentle power that had become familiar, comforting, and safe. When newcomers arrived, they were often amazed at the unusual pair. People whispered about the human who had survived storms and raiders, and the alien who had saved him time and again. They did not speak about weapons or machines. They spoke about courage, kindness, and the bond that had turned a lonely outpost into a thriving community. Jack remembered his old fears, the nights he had spent staring at the stars, wondering if anyone would ever choose to stay. He remembered the first day Cora had stepped off the shuttle, twice his size, completely unknown, and how he had felt both terrified and fascinated. And now, as he watched her laugh with the children, carrying them effortlessly like they weighed nothing, he felt a deep, quiet joy. He realized that the galaxy had been vast, cold, and indifferent, but that did not matter anymore, because in choosing each other they had created warmth, home, and hope. They had proven that even in a universe that could be cruel, humanity could shine brightest through connection, compassion, and courage. Cora approached Jack as he stood watching the sunset over the red plains. Her eyes met his, and without words, they shared the understanding that had grown between them over years of storms, challenges, and small, quiet moments of trust. She lowered herself slightly so they could meet at eye level. "You were right to choose," she said softly, "and so was I." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of everything they had been through. "We've built something here, not just walls, not just machines, but something real, something that matters." Cora's massive hand rested on his shoulder, careful as always, and he felt the warmth of it spread through him. "We did it together," she said. Jack smiled. He had faced storms, raiders, fear, and loneliness. He had doubted himself and her. And now, standing with Cora beside him, he understood the truth of everything he had learned. That courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. That strength was not measured by size, but by the heart and the willingness to protect what matters. That humanity, real humanity, was the ability to care, to choose, and to love. As night fell, the stars shimmered above the outpost. Children ran around, their laughter echoing into the dark. The wind whispered across the plains, gentler now, carrying the promise of tomorrow. Jack and Cora stood side by side, looking at their home, at the life they had built, at the future that stretched endlessly before them. Jack realized finally that he had never been truly alone. Not when Cora arrived. Not when they had faced every storm together. Not when they had chosen each other against all odds. And he knew that, no matter what the galaxy brought, they would always stand together, human and alien, small and vast, heart and courage entwined. Somewhere in the silence of space, far beyond the red plains and the outpost lights, the universe could see something extraordinary. That humanity, even in its smallest and simplest form, could rise above fear and loneliness. That it could create hope. That it could endure. And in the quiet of that frontier night, Jack held Cora's hand, the enormous, gentle hand that had saved him so many times, and whispered, "We are home." Cora's smile stretched across her face, wide and warm, and she replied softly, "Yes, together we are home." And in that moment, the lonely human and the alien giant proved what humanity had always known deep inside. That no matter how vast the galaxy, connection, trust, and love could conquer anything.